Library. Today's program will begin momentarily. Supported by Verso Studios, created locally and shared with the world.
Good evening, friends. And a warm welcome to this very special Westport Reads event. I'm Bill Harmer, the Executive Director of the Westport Library. I got to tell you, for a Friday night, it's sure amazing to see all of you turn out for an event like this. And if that's not a reflection on what a vibrant literary community looks like, I don't know what is. So thank you for coming out. For those of you who may not know, Westport Reads was born in 2002. It holds a special place in our hearts because it brings the community together through the power of literature. It's an opportunity for all of us to engage deeply with a single book, fostering conversations, connections, and shared experiences. We believe in the transformational power of the book and the ability of stories to unite us, and Westport Reads really embodies that spirit. I'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the late Jerry Tishman, whose unwavering support and generosity have allowed us to continue to thrive and expand the Westport Reads program. Through his estate, Jerry pledged a multi-year grant that has allowed us to ensure the longevity of this cherished tradition for Westport, and we're truly grateful for his legacy of friendship and dedication. So thank you, Jerry, for everything that you've done for us. This year's selection, The Art Thief by Michael Finkel, resonates with Westporters in many ways. Our town, as you all know, has a rich history as a community that appreciates the arts. And this gripping tale of Stéphane Breitwieser's audacious art heists struck a chord with our selection committee. Breitwieser's ability to steal art worth over $2 billion from museums and cathedrals all across Europe is a story of intrigue, ambition, and ultimately a spectacular fall from grace. Our guest of honor, Michael Finkel, stands among the foremost contemporary nonfiction authors, boasting 3 New York Times bestsellers to his name. Mr. Finkel's storytelling prowess is and knows no bounds. Among his notable works include The Stranger in the Woods, a New York Times bestseller chronicling the life of a highly intelligent man who spent 27 solitary years in the Maine wilderness. Additionally, True Story delves into Mr. Finkel's unconventional and unsettling friendship with a murderer, which was eventually adapted into a 2015 film produced by Brad Pitt. Michael's reporting journey is taking him across more than 50 countries on 6 continents, covering an eclectic array of topics from documenting the world's last hunter-gatherer tribes to reporting on conflicts in Afghanistan and Israel. He has ventured into the international underground markets in human organs and delved into the depths of theoretical physics. In his pursuit of journalistic truth, Michael's exploits are nothing short of extraordinary. Check this out. He has skied down Mount Kilimanjaro, sailed on a Haitian refugee boat, joined a cult in Colorado, survived a tank running over his car in Afghanistan, ventured into an active volcano in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We've all done that, right? And crossed the Sahara Desert atop an open truck. His work graces the pages of renowned publications like National Geographic, GQ, The Atlantic, Esquire, Rolling Stone, and New York Times Magazine. Tonight, Mr. Finkel will be joined in conversation with our friend Evie Cavacci, co-chair of the Westport Public Art Collections Committee, otherwise known to us Westporters as WestPAC, and is also an adjunct professor in art history at Fairfield University. Eva's expertise in the art world and her curation and numerous exhibitions are going to contribute a great deal to tonight's discussion. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to welcome you all here, and let's bring to the Westport stage Mr. Finkel and Eva. Thank you.
All right. A lot of budding art thieves in the room. A motley looking crew here taking notes. I would double attach all the artwork to the wall with this crowd.
I think it's pretty securely attached. We're good. We're good here. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's such a pleasure to be here with Mike Finkel and discuss this book that left me alternately fascinated and horrified as a person who works in the arts. And welcome back to Connecticut. I understand you grew up in Stamford.
I'm a graduate of West Hill High School, and I'm happy to be back here. I just want to thank the community. I'm completely honored. There are literally a million books you could have chosen. I do not take it for granted that you selected The Art Thief, so thank you so much. I'm a little bit overwhelmed, actually, by that.
Great, well, let's dive into it.
Maybe.
So you grew up here. Were you a museum person? Did you go to a lot of the museums in New York when you were young, or in Connecticut?
I definitely grew up, like Stéphane Breitwieser, but maybe without the criminal bent. Yeah, I mean, there's like the riches of the world are in museums. How could, I always feel like they're overwhelmingly beautiful and sometimes overwhelming. And if we leave here with anything, and I think we'll get to that, it's like, I think besides the criminality and the shenanigans and the rise and fall of Stéphane Breitwieser, I think that he sort of changed the way my time with Stéphane changed the way I interact with works of art. There's this whole thinking that you have to suddenly intellectualize or become some sort of strange professor when you're in a museum and facing a work of art. And I really loved the way Stéphane sort of brought emotion to the fore. I didn't really love the way he took them home. And of course, I'm assuming everyone knows the book. And of course, his mother is another a story altogether. His mother.
We will get to his mother for sure. How did you find out about this thief? I had certainly never heard of him before your book, and I read a lot of art stuff. How did you find out about him? What made you think it was a good project for you and for a book?
So you want me to give away my secrets for how I find stories? I mean, so when I'm looking for a story, I literally sit down at my computer and I'm like, I need a new story. And I will go to the Google and be like, what's an amazing story that nobody knows about? I really feel like I'm like my own news director when I'm looking for something. And I'm lucky that I speak a little bit of French. And I remember, I like to go to small town papers. Okay. Strange stuff tends to happen in small towns. I mean, big cities get the credit for all the culture, but the weirdness and the true stories take place in the countryside. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I think my previous book about a hermit was mentioned, and that I read about in a small paper in Maine. And I just went to, I read a 4-paragraph article in a French newspaper just sitting at my home at the time in Bozeman, Montana, and I'm reading 200 heists, $2 billion, most prolific art thief, and then you think this is like ancient history. I read the guy who was born in 1971, was alive and well, and of course, what really attracted me to the story was the fact that Breitwieser stole, it seemed, for the aesthetic pleasure of it, just to hang it in his room. I mean, who doesn't go to an art museum and look at a work of art and say, man, wouldn't that look great over the sofa?
I think many of us have had that thought, right? But his is a little different, his acting on it. So you've spoken with him, you've sat down with him many hours, you've gone on road trips with him. Can you take us a little bit into your process of talking with him and some of the other people that you interviewed and came across in this process?
Yeah, so I like to start things out. Nobody likes to get a phone call these days. Nobody reads their emails, really. And, of course, text messages just get ignored, especially from an unfamiliar number. But I wrote Stéphane Breitwieser a letter, which I mailed to he wrote a ghost-written book that was only available in French. And I sent it to the publishing company in my I have poor grammar in French, but anyway, I wrote a letter, and I think there's even like a little chapter in the back about how I accomplished the reporting. But basically, we exchanged letters for, oh my God, I think if there was one word to describe my writing process, it would be inefficient. So really, don't take any notes from how to get something done quickly from me. We exchanged, it took them 2 years to respond to my first letter, by which time my whole family, my wife, and my 3 young children, we moved to France. Had nothing to do with Breitwieser and everything to do with wanting to learn another language and immerse ourselves in another culture. And we exchanged letters for 4 years. Ridiculous. Yeah, I did a few other things along with, I still had to pay the bills and keep the lights on. And finally, Stéphane Breitwieser agreed to meet me for a lunch, and I wasn't allowed to bring a notebook or a tape recorder. And apparently he thought my French was perhaps un peu charmante, a little charming maybe, and agreed to sit with me. Let's see, there's no picture of Stéphane Breitwieser in the book, and I don't know if anybody looked it up, but let's just see what he looked like. I'm going to try and show some slides. Enough of my babbling. Let's take a look at some pictures. This, by the way, is just a picture I literally took as I'm just strolling down the streets. This is so much fun to travel the small towns of Europe. This is the village of Thann, where Breitwieser and his girlfriend stole their very first item, that pistol. And here's what Stéphane Breitwieser looked like around 2007, at the end of his trials. And this is what he looks like. Not a bad-looking guy. And, yeah, hi, Stéphane.
And this here, is this where they live?
Literally, it's just another small town, just as I'm driving around the Alsatian countryside.
So, can you go back to the cover for 1 second? Because I have to ask about the cover, and then we'll come back. There you go. So I think, personally, we're not judging books by their cover here, but if we were, this would be brilliant on the cover alone. Did you have any insight into the process of designing the cover?
Oh my goodness, so we're talking about the cover. So
yeah, I mean,
like a work of art. I bet you if we took a poll here and asked who liked the cover and who didn't, don't be shy. There would be people who do not like the cover. So I have very little control over anything besides the prose once you get put in the sausage machine of the publishing industry. You can kind of say, oh my God, the way the publishing industry, they phrase things in the form of a question, but it's something like, hey, Mike, do you like this cover or do you want your book to fail? I say, I like the cover. Very astute observers, not that you don't have to be an astute observer, mention what's that bat about? You don't even mention it in the book. And so an earlier draft of the book, Stéphane talked to me about this particular Dürer bat print. He twice, or maybe even 3 times, tried to steal that print, and it was never exactly the right moment. I think one of the reasons why Stéphane was such a successful thief is that he knew when not to steal sometimes. And so he mentioned this bat twice. I had a whole scene of him trying to steal this bat in an earlier version, cut it out, but then the designer of the cover put it in. Again, they phrased my demand in the form of a question. I like the cover. We'll poll the audience. You can tell me later how you really feel about it, but, it's more about the words on the inside, isn't it?
Sure it is. We'll get there. Okay, so let's get to the inside. So I went to a lecture earlier this week about the Isabella Stewart Gardner heist, and they showed a pie chart where it was 99-point-something% of heists are financially motivated or ransom or, these kind of usual art. But Stéphane Breitwieser is so different. Tell us a little bit, what makes him so unique? What motivates him, or what do you think motivates him to do this?
As we know, he is an outlier among outliers. He's one of the reasons why he was able to get away with things for so long is that none of the police could possibly believe that someone would steal art for the pleasure of it. I can't think of a better reason, frankly. I don't think I would have pursued this story if it wasn't for that specific fact that he literally, at least for the first 95% of his thieving career, was truly stealing for the aesthetic pleasure. And, we're gonna, in a little bit later, we're gonna show you what the inside of his attic rooms look like. But it was like, you know, I want all like us to imagine this like chamber, and you'd think, I think that if this book were fiction, you'd throw it across the room and say, this is not believable. No one's really putting $2 billion of work on the walls of like some absolutely anonymous looking house, and we'll show a few photos of that too. And before I go on, I do want to say, we'll flip through a couple of slides, that everything I'm speaking about tonight and the book itself is true. This is not sort of true, it's not newsy, it's not fake news. This is really a true story to the best of my abilities. Now, as we know, I wasn't able to talk to Anne-Catherine, Stéphane's girlfriend, nor his mother, but Breitwieser himself was so precise. I just want to show a couple of things. These are some of the drawings he made, either for me or for the police, describing like the specific details of each of the works he stole. Here's like a room, a gallery in a museum where he's circling exactly where he entered, and where, like, here's where he like sliced open a display case. And he would draw these things sometimes for me while I was interviewing him, and then I would go get the police reports that were written up like the day after the crime, and they would be almost perfectly matched. And if there were any discrepancies, I had the opportunity to ask Stéphane to clear them up. And sometimes, like in this one, he's not only talking about what item he stole, and sometimes this is 20 years in the past, he's remembering all the other works on the walls of the museum. And I would go into these galleries from which he stole, and I would be incredulous where he remembered everything. He said to me he didn't have a photographic memory. He just said he remembered everything. But it was like journalistic catnip to listen to someone like Stéphane, who was able to sort of tell all these amazing stories with such, like, literally step by step, point by point. And, you know, we even went to a few museums together where he reenacted his crimes.
Yeah.
I got some photos of that too. Stay tuned.
Do you want to show us a few of the things that he stole? I mean, you explain in the book that he steals when he's really attracted to something, when he has this coup de coeur, or sudden inspiration, or lust, if you will, for a particular object.
Right, so if I asked everyone here to imagine something beautiful, I think we might all imagine something a little different, which is great. Imagine, you know, it would be boring if we all thought of the same thing, whether it's a lover or a sunset or natural beauty or a particular form of art. So Stéphane had, you know, he started out a little bit scattered, but always had this love of late Renaissance, early Baroque. By what I mean is 16th and 17th century. Love of those paintings, and 17th and 18th century objects, anything that was made before the Industrial Revolution, everything made by hand. And besides the fact that he was an incorrigible art thief, man, he would make a great art professor. Anyway, some of the photos are in the book, but it's really nice. Let's go through just quickly to see some of the items Breitwieser stole. This is the first thing, the pistol that he stole with Anne-Catherine in the village that I showed you before, with that river coming through. This is actually the juror that he stole. He was unable to steal the bat print, but he got this one. And then we have like Cranax. This is Juror and Cranax, and this is the Sleeping Shepherd by Boucher, I believe. This is a nice Van Kessel still life. This is the de Leon painting that he stole, basically hanging in a museum for 135 years, and he ripped it out of its double frame. And assuming that everyone, or many people here have read the book, there's also, you know, when I show these slides, there has to be like a tinge of melancholy, because none of these paintings exist anymore, nor will they ever exist. Here's one of the tobacco boxes he stole. This is one that Napoleon himself commissioned and gave out to some of his supporters. This is the apothecary painting that Breitwieser stole. This piece was so secure. This was the one that had a specific camera pointed at just this artwork. I mean, its own camera. Like, I can't think of any way you can make something more secure without like an armed guard and like a cage around it. And Breitwieser, just putting his back to the camera, if you recall that scene, was able to steal this painting, which, like all the other ones, is nothing more than ash right now.
Keep your eye on that, on the lower right of that painting. You may recognize that similar type again.
This is some of the gold he stole. This is a beautiful wooden piece depicting one of the life of Christ, also missing forever. This is, of course, one of Breitwieser's favorite thing, the ivory Adam and Eve, which we'll definitely get back to later. This is an ivory, Three Graces. This is the 10-foot by 10-foot tapestry that had quite the journey, thrown out of the window of a castle, then discarded along the side of the road, then installed underneath the billiards table of a police station, then restored in a museum and back on the wall. Congratulations, 16th century tapestry. Some of the beautiful silver pieces he stole. This is one with a coconut in it. This is called an abrello, basically an ancient apothecary jar, and more. And more. I love this. This is the silver boat, and more, and more, and more, and more, and more, and more, and more. And now, okay, none of you have to read this slide, but it took me forever to make. Here is a list of all 201 crimes that I could find for Stéphane Breitwieser. Don't have to read it, but it took me a long time to compile it. And this is everything, and there might, I mean, Breitwieser, all the statutes of limitations have pretty much expired, so Breitwieser had no reason to hold anything back. So I think this is the complete list of 201 thefts with 312 or so items. Who knows what the real value is, anywhere between several $100 million and $2 billion. And this map is in the book itself. This is where everything was stolen. We'll leave it off for here.
So, why do you think he kept stealing after being caught several times? I mean, you have perspectives in there from psychologists, from therapists, from criminologists, from himself. You know, why did he just keep going back to it?
So when I write a book, it took me 11 years to write the book. The book came out a couple of months ago, and if you ask me, like, how do you feel about Stéphane Breitwieser? Like, every 10 minutes, I might have a slightly different opinion. Like, oh my God, what a bastard. What an impressive, like, amount of thieving. What an aesthete. What a dick, you know? And I, you know, the way I like to write something is I'm kind of curious as to how everybody else feels about Breitwieser. If you get a chance to talk to me afterwards, please let me know. I think it's good when the author's not quite sure how he or she feels. I kind of sometimes feel that readers, and thank you for anyone who took the time to read the book, I appreciate that. I sometimes think of readers as like the jury. And although a writer can put their thumb on the scale, and I'm human and I'm filled with biases, so I'm not saying that I was completely impartial, but I really like to put the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful, and the tragic all together and see, and, you know, if anybody comes up to me and says, you know, he's complete, you know, degenerate, or I kind of weirdly respect him, nobody's wrong. And, you know, I'm not sure if people out here like that, but I really feel like, don't tell the reader how to feel, like lay everything out in a pleasing way and let the reader, him or herself, sort of come up with that, with how they feel. And if it keeps morphing, all the more better. And you know, I do look for those stories that are completely twisty. I think you figure once he gets caught, that's the end, and it's really kind of just the beginning.
And you did have the chance to walk through a museum with him. This was after he'd gotten caught, obviously, and then somehow he was out and able to visit a museum with you? How did they let him back in there?
What's it like to go through a museum, to visit a museum with the world's greatest art thief? Well, I'll tell you. This is actually a picture in Belgium of the museum from which Breitwieser stole Adam and Eve ivory. Beautiful museum. Former home of the painter. It's like slipping my mind now. Anybody remember the?
Rubens, was it?
What was it?
Rubens?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I got a little nervous up here. I got too many people staring at me. Exactly, the Rubens House Museum in Brussels. This is the outside of it. And I kept asking, for some reason, the Adam and Eve ivory kept coming up, and I'm like, oh, I really want to know about this. And I convinced Breitwieser to drive with me to this museum. It was like a 4 or 5 hour drive from his house. And by the way, when he's in a car, I was driving for the first leg, he's kind of quiet, almost reserved, low energy, lethargic. And then when we pulled up to the museum and we were walking there, it was like he'd had a triple latte or something like that. He kind of came to life. So what's it like to go into a museum with the world's greatest art thief? Let's just do a couple of fun slides. They're definitely not in the book here, and nobody take too many notes here. Not the greatest picture, but this is Stéphane Breitwieser actually in the room with the ivory Adam and Eve. He's wearing baseball. His grand disguise is a baseball hat and a pair of glasses with just clear lenses. He doesn't need any correction. And if you recall from the book, Breitwieser loved to cut the silicone glue, and you could see quite clearly in this picture, also taken at the Rubens house, the silicone glue sort of has a nice glow there, and that is exactly where he would cut it to steal something like that. It's called a tassa, that flat cup in there. Only with a great art thief will you stop at a museum exhibit like this. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he would study the map there to see where all the doors were, and then check, you can see the central courtyard in this drawing, and there's a couple of doors leading there, and there were no alarms on them. Okay, so we're in the room with the Adam and Eve ivory, and I said to Breitwieser, you think you'd be able to steal it now? And he said, look at the guard, and I snapped a photo of her. It's probably a bad picture, but she was literally, for the half hour that we were in the room, she never took her eyes off of her portable telephone, and Breitwieser said, with ease. Only, again, not just looking at the exit map, Breitwieser, as I mentioned before, would make a great art professor, enthusiastic, emotions first, ridiculous vocabulary later. But then his tour of each piece that he loved continued on the back. And I remember snapping this photo, him telling me, look, there's supposed to be like a wire connecting those two eyelets there. You can literally lift this painting off the wall. Let's see what the next slide is. Oh, I think this is another one of his drawings showing me where he cuts something. Let me see what we got here. Yeah, I'd like to, let's see what we got. I'd like to should we show like a video of his room? Are we going to get there?
Can I just ask quickly?
Yeah, you can ask slowly.
Do you think something like this could be pulled off today?
I think that's a great question. I think the answer is yes. And
we have blink cameras everywhere.
It's sort of like that counterfeiting thing. The better the anti-counterfeiting gets, the better the counterfeiters get. The mission, of course, of a museum is to allow you to commune with a work of art without feeling encumbered by security apparatus and guards. And how terrible would it be if there was like grates over the front of all paintings? And as is mentioned in the book, but as I think everyone should sort of digest, there's an amazing amount of public trust going on. And 99.9% of us can be honest individuals, but it doesn't take but a tiny percentage of people to sort of ruin it for everyone. So I sure hope there's not a lot more Breitwisers, and luckily there really aren't. But to answer your question, I think that we can all wonder where Stéphane is today. He's actually under the French penal. He's not incarcerated, but he's under control of the French penal system. But I would not be surprised if Breitwieser continued his stealing ways in the future, and I think he would have unfortunately not too much trouble doing that.
Well, let's see where all this stuff ended up.
I mean, the attic rooms, I kept thinking about this as I was writing it, and I write in a very small, like literally a closet. It was a janitor's closet in a elementary school, an old elementary school that was converted into office space, and they were like offering classrooms to artists and creative people, and I was like, too big, too many windows, and I was literally the janitor's closet. I'm like, you renting this out? They're like, we hadn't thought of it. And they were charging rent by the square foot, and they were like $32 a month. I took the door out, which was one of those classic metal doors that they have on janitor's closet, and I put one in with a small window. But other than that, I literally wrote it in the closet, a sensory deprivation chamber. So all this beauty and all this artwork was only alive in my mind, but I kept imagining Breitwieser's attic. Here is a photo of the house, of Breitwieser's mother's house. Those two windows that you can see at the top are the windows that led into the attic room. So this is like the most basic house. It's basically a cube with a roof on the top, and the front door is just cut into the side. I did have an artist draw a map, this is in the book, draw a map of what the rooms sort of looked like. Now, I spent, as I mentioned, more than a decade working on this, and I was able to find some video of Breitwieser's rooms, and I would like to share it with you. Some of this video, it comes from the documentary that was made about Breitwieser by a Swiss documentarian, and Breitwieser quashed the whole project, so some of this is thanks to the documentarian who helped me get a hold of this footage, and this is the footage that was not discovered by the police in time for his trial. It would have sunk him. So the first one, if you'll bear with me, I think it's about a minute long, is a tour of Breitwieser's rooms. I think it's 95 or 96. It says it up there. You'll have to imagine the rooms 5 times more crowded. This is literally 20% of his collection, and it's still pretty impressive. This is pretty much the only existing piece of video that shows a little bit what the attic rooms look like, and I'd love to play this for you. Right now, I put some English subtitles on the French, and hopefully this will work out. Here's a small tour of his attic rooms.
Ivoire, Hermès, Rosenthal. Icône 19e siècle. Pistolet 19e siècle. Étain. Coupe Tisley Saint-Louis or. Les œuvres d'art en question que j'avais donc volées, ils étaient dans 2 chambres, donc à savoir un salon particulier que j'avais et une chambre à coucher. Parce que ma mère avait quand même des amis qui venaient régulièrement à la maison, donc je me voyais pas en train de laisser traîner un cranac ou un ivoire du XVIIe siècle en bas dans le salon. Baromètre Napoléon III. C'était un monde que je me suis créé et où je me sentais bien avec eux. C'était un petit peu casser un peu la routine de la vie actuelle, stress, métro, dodo, boulot, toutes ces conneries. Et je sais pas, cette modernité que je n'apprécie pas trop.
So that's sort of what it looked like. I had to black out Anne-Catherine's face. There are some pretty strict shield laws in Europe. I didn't get permission to show Anne-Catherine's face. But I mean, who wouldn't love a bedroom like that? Let's be honest about that. I mean, what a wonderful thing. There's one more video we could show, which I don't think I've ever showed. This is literally the first time I've shown it to anybody besides like myself and my editor. There's a scene in the book that you might recall where it's Christmas and Anne-Catherine puts the camera on Breitwieser, and she's like, what are you gonna do? What's your New Year's resolution? And he's like, nothing. And then she sort of, so we've cut and pasted a few little clips together, but this is a chance to see, although I've blacked out the eyes on Anne-Catherine and Breitwieser's mother, this scene takes place at the lower floor of the house, right around Christmas, with some kind of tinny Christmas music playing. But let's watch another 30 or 45-second clip. If you'll bear with me, it's kind of fun to see. It sort of brings home that this is non-fiction. These are real people. It's sort of, every time I look at these clips, by the way, I'm still amazed that this actually happened. I guess that's a sign of a good story. All right, let's watch this. What's his mother?
Les deux femmes ne parleront pas. Peut-être les images de Stéphane nous permettront de mieux comprendre les secrets qu'ils partageaient.
C'est tout. C'est quelque chose d'autre. Je fais quelque chose d'autre, je vous prie. Ouais, t'as un problème dedans?
His nickname for Catherine.
J'essaie de piquer si j'arrive des tableaux, des arts, on fait des antiquités. Sauf que j'ai 3 millions, minimum, au moins. Si j'ai moins d'1 million, je chiale. Ouais, je chiale, donne moins de... Ouais, il faut 3 millions, mais vraiment au bas mot 2 millions. Si j'ai moins de 2 millions, je me sentirais pas bien. C'est tout ce que j'ai à dire. 3 millions de francs, hein, français. Français? Mais bon. Voilà. C'est bon, s'il vous plaît.
It's sort of amazing to me how he can just joke around about how much he's going to steal, and his mother's in the room at this time, and just casually announce, there's this weird banter between Anne-Catherine and Stéphane, like, I want to steal 3 million. She's like, old francs or new francs? Anyway, it was cut from a larger clip, but it's sort of, I don't, does it bring home the absurdity of the whole thing? Does it, I have no idea how it's supposed to make you feel.
Yeah, but it does bring us to the topic of the two women in his life, Anne-Catherine Kleinklaus and his mother, who, as you've said, made clear you were not able to talk to. How did you, get a sense of their relationships, and how did you choose to put that into the book or hold back when you needed to?
Right, so I met Stéphane Breitwieser's mother, and you can make a claim, I think, that maybe she could be the real villain, the person who, the question here is like, why would someone, the easiest thing to do would just be to return all the stolen works to the police. It's just simple. You just call the police, you tell them I have them, and, after her son was arrested, but no, she went out of her way to go and destroy more than 69 paintings, plus almost all the pieces in wood, and everything else was dumped in a canal. Like, why would you do that? And again, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's up to all of us to sort of parse. I was able to get some of the psychology reports on the mother, all of the police interrogations, but to this day, it is a little bit confounding. And what Breitwieser said to the police, and what one of the psychologists said, is that basically she wanted to punish her son in the most severe way possible. And I really can't imagine a more severe psychological punishment than destroying the works of art. I did like what one of the psychologists said, that the mother felt that her son's love was sort of invested in these works of art rather than in his poor mother. Isn't that a classic psychological thing? Tell me about your mother. And then Anne-Catherine also wisely declined to speak with me. We had a small meeting at the hospital in which she still works, in which she expressed that she did not want to talk to me. And journalists can be a little bit pushy, but I totally understand. She completely lied during her trial, saying she barely even went to the attic. There's video evidence that she's like, oh yeah, I'm stealing 3 million this year. She's, I wonder if I did have a chance to talk with Anne-Catherine, if it would have been actually more complicating, because she would be in this very weird position. She's not going to suddenly say, yes, I was involved in stealing everything, but I saw when I was interviewing some of the police officers that chased Breitwieser some video footage, especially the one where he unscrews the 30 screws to steal this thing, and she's right there on lookout, and there's just no way to deny her involvement. In fact, if anything, I think she was more involved than even the book sort of mentions, but she managed to perform the great escape, the greatest of all the three characters. So yeah, the two women are fascinating unto themselves and a little bit opaque, unfortunately, but this is nonfiction, as I mentioned before. I think if I was writing fiction, first of all, it would be unbelievable. I would have to cut down the number of crimes by like 90%. I mean, let's just keep it at 20 crimes. And I think the two women might have a more defined role, but they sort of hover there in the background. And again, as you can feel a pantheon of different reactions to Stéphane, to Anne-Catherine, and to his mother. All three complicated and enraging characters on some level, are real people, of course.
Right, yeah. And besides the works that his mother presumably burned, and the works that were recovered from the canal, there's still some works that are unaccounted for, right? Is there any hope that those might turn up? It seems like Breitwieser had some hope.
Okay, so we did not prepare these questions in
No.
advance, but I like this question. I hadn't shown that second clip, I have not mentioned what I'm going to do next. And before I get into what's my next little adventure, somehow this slide slipped out of the way. When I was walking around the museum with Stéphane Breitwieser, we stopped by the Adam and Eve that he once stole, and there he is, just staring at the thing that was right by his bedside table. So, 300 works of art stolen. The best I could come up with was the whereabouts of about 220 of them, literally 80 pieces of museum quality, many of them masterpieces, some of them that I showed you that three Graces ivory, which doesn't burn or get destroyed by water. So where 80 pieces, this is not 1, 2, 10, 20, or 50, 80 pieces. Where are they? I think I might know where a couple of them are. This is I'm just going to talk about it. This is literally the first time I'm talking about this in public. Nobody tell anybody, because I plan to have a little surprise. The soft cover will be coming out next summer, and so I'm driving around with Breitwieser, including on this trip to Brussels. And we speak to each other in French, and we're driving through the Alsace region. He's like, take a right here, take a left. And we get onto this dirt road, and he's like, pull over here. And he gets off to the side of the road, and he pushes these very thick bushes away. He's like, nope, he gets in the car. We go another couple of 100 meters, and he says, stop here. And he's pushing his way through some bushes, and he says, here. And he pulls apart some heavy undergrowth, and there's a muddy pond, and he just looks at, this is not in the book, and he looks at me and he says, I would look here. And we continued on our way back, to do museums, and continued on tours, and I looked up the property, and it is actually where that pond, I've stuck a pin in it on my GPS thing. I dropped the pin, and it actually was the property that was owned by Breitwieser's mother's boyfriend, who may have helped out on the night of destruction. He has actually since passed away. But this is the first I'm talking about this in public. Only my editor knows. My plan for this spring, I've hired a professional diver who has this crazy machine that's able to look for metal underwater. The water is brackish, and I'm going to see if we can uncover some of these works. No, my plan is, I think most of them are silver pieces and many of them chalices, and my dream is to uncover a few of these pieces, or even just one, and maybe enjoy a great glass of wine out of it, and then maybe put it on my nightstand for one night, and then, of course, return it to the museum from which it has been found. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, you know, why aren't the police looking in every pond all over the place? And I just think they exhausted their resources, and there's just nobody looking for it. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll let you know. How many times, this like really fires up like the little boy in me. How many times can you go on a real life treasure hunt? And it really does speak. This was like the 10th year that I had been in touch with Breitwieser when he finally entrusted me enough to sort of like poke me on the shoulder and say, look here. And I actually asked him why he didn't look there. And he said he wasn't a professional diver, and he sort of like washed his whole hands of it, and he can't be sure, but nobody takes you to a pond like that and says something. So obviously his mother or his mother's boyfriend, who, like I said, has since passed away, someone said something. And I don't have an answer. I will let you know.
Well, that's very exciting.
I know, I'm excited about myself.
But well, the other works that came out of the canal, they've been restored and cleaned and returned to where they were. So that was fortunate that those were safely recovered so quickly.
I don't recommend throwing your Renaissance silver into a canal, but they seem to have survived their bath. But the paintings, though there's no proof, as I think it's clear in the book, not a single one of those paintings have shown up. You know, like I said, literally the statute of limitations has expired. Breitwieser could parade through the street with his Kranach, say, here's the Kranach, blah, 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 and he wouldn't get in any more trouble. And that has not happened with any one piece. And when I'm interviewing someone, especially since I was speaking French, you know, I was about to say I have an annoying way, but I will ask the same question like 4 or 5 times, and sometimes even purposely make a mistake, and to see if there's consistency. And Breitwieser was adamant that he knew that his mother had burned everything. And as much as like when I think about the 2 rooms filled with treasure, it like fills me with this weird joy. When I think about that fire, it like I can't help but like, you know, tense up and just be like, oh my God, how could you possibly do that? So in preparing to write this book, I mentioned this in the very back, I went to a couple of yard sales and bought some cheap oil paintings. And I think all children and their father are pyromaniacs at heart, and I did actually take a pile of oil paintings that none of them cost more than $10 and burned them in my backyard to see if like that was actually possible. Can you burn an oil painting? And these are not Renaissance paintings. These are 21st century, you know, yard sale paintings. And I was like, I wonder if this is actually true. And by the way, yeah, it's really easy to burn a painting. I like took a lighter and it went, I was like, wow. And imagine even something older, and these are mostly painted on canvas, not ancient wood, and this is where I did experience, I was like, I wonder what it's like, and I'm like videoing it and circling around it, and I saw the phenomenon of like the beads of paint, like dripping, colorful beads of paint dripping to the ground, and I mean, I can't recommend burning a pile of paintings, but it was all in the line of research.
That's taking it quite the next step.
I mean, I'm a journalist. I got to experience things.
Great. So I think it's almost time for us to turn this over to you guys for questions. I have a ton more, but we have a great audience here, and I know you guys want to have a chance to pose your questions about the book.
Everything's fair game. If I don't like the question, I'll just pretend to answer it, but I'll answer something else. But no, anything that you would like to know. I mean, some people want to know, like, what's my relationship with Breitwieser like? What did he think about the book? I sent him, to answer my own question before we get people, I sent him a copy of the book, and he wrote me an email back saying, my English sucks. I couldn't get through it. There will be a French translation coming out in a couple of months, and so he'll have a chance to read it.
So if anybody does have any questions, please come on over here and line up, and we will go in order of folks who stand here.
Okay, while we're waiting for the first brave questioner, I will also share with you what I wore for Halloween a couple of months ago. Here's my Halloween costume 2023. There you go. Sir.
Hey, thank you for all the commentary. It was great, both of you. How old is he now, and where does he reside? Is he still in France, did you say?
Yeah, Breitwieser was born in 1971, so he's about 53 years old. If you recall, at the very end of his story, everything in his life falls apart, you know. The idea that he really took beautiful care of the works, that gets subverted. You know, several things in his attic got destroyed. This idea that he's a true aesthete who would only steal for the love of the art also gets subverted. He got caught trying to sell something. The last time I saw Stéphane Breitwieser in person was in March, it's about 8 months ago, March of 2023, for his trial. Oh, I've never talked about this either. This is a good question. Yeah, for his trial for selling objects of art. And I thought, oh man, they're gonna throw the book at him. And I was sitting there in the courtroom watching this trial, and I could not believe Breitwieser's man, I can't decide whether I'm impressed or just disgusted. He put on a show. He bawled, he cried, he begged forgiveness. He seemed completely mentally unhinged, where I had just talked to him that morning, you know, and he was completely fine. And the judges, after this long recess in which he had, you know, disrupted the proceedings, they go back into chambers and they come out and they say, clearly, Stéphane Breitwieser is in a fragile mental state, and rather than prison time, he was given like 7 years probation. He literally did not go to prison again. Maybe it's some of the European system, and maybe it's like Stéphane's sort of crazy ability to evade the law, but once again, sort of gets away with things. So right now he's being monitored. He has what you would call parole agent that he has to check in with once a week. I think he actually has an ankle monitor, and he's not allowed to leave home, but he's certainly not imprisoned. And as generous as I may feel about him, wow, I think he deserves to be in prison. We can talk about this. Like nobody really got punished for these crimes. Please.
So it sounds like he made a very bad lifestyle choice. But did he really express any remorse, or was it really an act? And the other question I had was, or considering what you said about his relationship with his mother, was he trying to impress his mother, or did he feel when she got rid of everything that he was like gutted by that or angry at her?
Okay, first, remorse. Never. No remorse at all. I'm not gonna edit myself. I weirdly respect that because like it was of a piece, that was his character. Like he thought that he loved these works of art more than anyone else. He thought that a work itself should not, remember he called museums prisons for art. Like what you want to do is make love to your girlfriend in front of the newest piece of art. You want to touch it. You want to sit in a relaxed chair. You want to experience a work of art, which is challenging to do sometimes in a museum, which is so crowded. So no, he never turned to me and said, Mike, I wish I really had never done that and, was a barista or something like that. No, I mean, every time I talked to him, I was like, well, why couldn't you just go to a museum frequently and see like the rest of us? So, no remorse. And then the second part of that question was delving into psychology. And of course, once you start crawling through the thickets of the human mind, you could just get lost. I can't really assign, I'm not a psychologist, even if I were. It's hard to know, what's going on. Was Stéphane Breitwieser a kleptomaniac, despite one of his own therapists saying, I dismiss kleptomania? Was he a thief? Was he an aesthete? Was he both? Was he neither? I don't know. I leave all the questions out for you sagacious readers to decide. If you asked me to vote, he truly did steal for the love of art, but man, he liked stealing. Let's just be honest about that. Leaving the frames as a calling card, he fancied himself some sort of James Bond villain. He really wanted to be respected. Oh my God, this picture's still up here. Sorry about that, guys. Please.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the book. I love books about art and artists, and there seem to be more about forgeries and thefts. My daughter, West Hill class of '99.
Go Vikings.
She says I have plot amnesia. I can't remember if it's in the book. Is he assisting authorities in any way regarding future thefts of others? Teaching them, look at the back, the wire's not there.
Actually, I thought that wasn't a bad idea. Stéphane Breitwieser, at the end of it, he didn't really write a book. He basically gave a couple of days interviews to his ghostwriter, and who wrote the most hagiographic book. It's only available in French. Maybe there's a German, but it's not available in English. So you have to read some French to see what Breitwieser said to his ghostwriter. He had that idea of becoming sort of a museum security consultant, like a lot of those computer hackers become consultants. And I thought that was a decent idea, but of course, then he shoplifts the clothing and just ridiculously starts selling things, and nobody is going to hire him to do that. But I think every time we went to a museum, he's like, look at this, all you have to do is put a motion detector here. Look at this old, even his ability to take an old display case to do sort of lever off the sliding door so it's hanging like a mailbox flap. And by the way, what chutzpah to go and eat at a museum cafe with a stolen work on your person. I would just be one big ball of flop sweat. There's just the police would just be like, him, there would be no way I could do that. So I think he was weird, what a perfect criminal. I think I can't remember who said the quote that it might have been, was it Walt Whitman or something, that there are people that are criminals that elevate their profession to the level of art. He's like the Da Vinci of art thieves. I think you would like to hear me say that. Forget it, or you're welcome, Stéphane, or maybe I take it back.
My second question is, of the recovered pieces, what does that do to the provenance of these works of art?
What does it do to the provenance?
Does it affect the provenance so that the part of the art's history is now included, there's theft included in its history?
I love this because I'm just wondering right now for the first time, how he started sticking those little notes on the back? One of the interesting things, I got the opportunity in doing some of this work to go into a few museum back rooms and to see a few paintings. And when you turn over an old painting, it's another world unto itself. Especially museum pieces that have been moved around, you could see all these exhibit numbers. It looks like an old steamer trunk with a lot of stickers on the back. Wouldn't it be cool if the notes that Stéphane wrote to his girlfriend were still on the back? I have a feeling that they've been removed because they were just stuck on there like a piece of paper. But now that I'm thinking about your question, I think it should be part of the provenance. And maybe, these are museum works, they're not for sale, but hey, this was part of the great art thieves, haul, and maybe it increases the value. If you remember that Banksy piece that he tried to have an auction. The auction nearby said somebody presses a button and it half destroys the work. I fooled you all. Of course, now this half destroyed work is worth more than it ever was before. So maybe the fact that a work had been stolen actually adds to its sort of legend. I think those stickers on the back have been removed, but now that I'm thinking of it, I think, wouldn't it be nice if they were still part of the back of the work? Mm-hmm. Please.
With Stéphane had such quick success, and he seemed to have such ambition towards thieving, but he couldn't apply that towards any other profession, and he couldn't remake himself. And then my second question is, how come he didn't make his own art? He only had interest in stealing other stuff?
Okay, now you remind me of what I say to my son. Well, if you took all that effort you use, playing Fortnite into doing something else, boy, would you have a great job. I mean, I think that another thing that we can be all over the map on is like, was he just a lazy person? Like, didn't want a job? I don't think Stéphane for a second thought of using his amazing skill in any other way. And then the second part of your question?
He didn't want to generate his own art. He wanted to steal it.
Yeah, I mean, like most of us, he appreciated great art and realized that he did not have the talent. I actually asked him this question. This is great because I did talk to him, didn't you want to paint yourself? And he said he never was really interested in that. But I saw, as we were walking through the Rubens House Museum and you saw some of the slides, it's not like Breitwieser was like overwhelmed by each piece. He'd be like, too religious, too somber, not the right color scheme. And then when he saw something, it was amazing change came over him. And it just like, for me, I live in the Rocky Mountains right now, although I grew up in Connecticut, I lived in Montana. I love the mountains, and when I see like the sky blazing orange after an amazing sunset, I get, or whatever it is that makes everyone here rapturous in front of something beautiful, whatever that is, that's amazing feeling. It's like human and beautiful and uncontrollable when we see something that we love, especially like a lover or another work of art, and he had that. So, everything is on a spectrum. People's reactions to work of art range from, a little bit to Breitwieser, an outlier in so many ways. And when I saw him react like with crazy love, enthusiasm, aesthetic rapture, I wouldn't say I was jealous, but wow, it is nice to feel overwhelmed by beauty. And I feel like we have a group of readers here, and like, when you read a book that you truly love, that you feel like the author's, I'm not talking about my own book here, but any book that you truly love, where the author feels like they're reaching through that weird space and talking directly to you. I mean, I feel like he had that reaction to a work of art. And as I was saying before we get to the next question, I hope that the next time that everyone here goes to a museum, they can have like a little Breitwieser voice in their ear, not to steal it, but to, talk about, what you see. It's funny, when we were standing in front of this ivory sculpture, he really wanted to point out, what's the first thing you see? What's the first thing you see? And, it's not really the apple. It's not really, the themes. It's boobies, penis. Like, these are beautiful. Like, this work wasn't made to intellectualize. It's really like an early Playboy centerfold. It was made to be erotic and to turn you on a little bit. And I think a lot of us forget that. So the next time you're in a museum, and you don't have to be turned on, but turn off the intellectualizing a little bit and up the emotional response. And it's funny because I feel like, and I'll include myself in this, sometimes people walk through museums and they're like, I'm not sure which ones I'm supposed to like or what I'm supposed to feel. And it's like, what do you mean you're supposed to? Like, how you react is exactly how you react. And I really liked, that's what I was mentioning earlier when I thought Breitwieser would be a great art professor, because however you feel in front of a work is absolutely correct. And there is no meaning for it. And so, like, when you're supposed to be horrified in front of images of war and a little bit rapturous in front of religious items. So anyway, we'll look at the penis and the boobies here as we go to the next question.
Okay, I think I'm the last question. One person you haven't brought up at all is his father, actually. And I'm curious whether in your time that you spent with Stéphane, whether he has explained a little bit more how his relationship or non-relationship with his father was, and maybe it explains also a little bit his behavior and why he became the man that he became.
So I spoke with the father very briefly and did read the police deposition that he gave. So strange to me that father, his mother, his grandparents, his girlfriend, all weirdly, nobody said to him, stop. I mean, I'm a parent of 3 people, you gotta use some discipline sometimes. Why doesn't the mother say, hey, that is unacceptable, and tomorrow morning we're taking everything back? Where was the adults in any of this? And I don't know. It's fascinating to me that after, he dates the second girl, Stephanie and Stéphane, and she immediately is like, what, you stole the work and put it on my apartment? I'm calling the police, like a normal person. And so when I mentioned it was like this perfect storm, not only was Breitwieser aesthetically obsessed and had sang-froid, cold-bloodedness, and able to steal, and then lived in Europe where all these tiny museums are underguarded, he also had enabling parents. So the father, to me, first expressed bafflement and then crazily this bizarre, well, if your son's gonna be a thief, he might as well be the best. That's my boy. So I think we've taken up all the time. I think you've been a patient audience. I hope this was at least somewhat enlightening. Are we have any more questions? Are we
That's all the questions we have time for tonight. And so I just want to give a big thanks to you, Mike and Ava, for your conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you to our Westport Reads committee. We're very proud of the choice we made this year. And if anybody wants to have their book signed, the signing will be over right there. Wave your hand, guys. That way. So you can come around and line up going towards this way.
Sounds good. Thank you.